Oh my freaking goodness, y'all. This is the first time I have ever had this happen, but Zoom did not automatically record the February live Q&A, and I'm so bummed out. That was 50 minutes straight of me answering questions deeply. So I'm so sorry. I hate to sacrifice the quality of responses that I give you guys. I'm gonna run back through everything. Oh man. But just keep that in mind. I am so sorry. And it's such a bummer because very few of you actually tuned into the live, and I'm sure you were looking forward to the recording. So, I'm so sorry. I don't know how this happened. I went and checked my settings on Zoom, and it was even set to auto record. Normally, what happens as soon as I hit end meeting, it starts recording and it starts loading the recording. And when that didn't happen, I was like, okay. Anyways, deep breaths. The first question that I responded to was about preservatives and testing for bacterial growth. And I posted a few links, and I'm going to post those in the description of this video. They are both videos of women who are a little more in the preservative world, talking about different options for preservatives and when to use them and why you might use them. So check those out. I'm also including a link on a bacteria and yeast testing kit. And this is a really nice testing kit. You don't have to send it to a lab. You don't have to, know how to look for these things. It comes with a little pamphlet that tells you exactly how to do it and what to look for. So this is great if you have a product that you're unsure about, or if you want to test a formulation and see if it holds well. So on that note of testing, the important thing to note about preservatives is, are you looking to just preserve the shelf life of something, or are you also hoping to inhibit the growth of yeast and bacteria? Because if you want to do both of those, then you really need a full spectrum preservative. The full spectrum preservatives that I use are Plantiserve and Germabin, and they go over those in those videos, so I'm not going to go deep back into it again. God, I'm so sad about this. So check those videos out if you're interested in preservatives. Those preservatives are specifically for external products like lotions, etc. I also want to say I don't use preservatives that often because I don't make many products that need them. I don't love the world of like stabilizers, emulsifiers, preservatives, etc. My love for herbalism is very intuitive and spiritual and ancestral. And so when I'm even like picking up a bottle of preservatives, my body's like, no, I don't want to do it. Not because I think they're bad. I'm all for preservatives, in fact. But more so, it just doesn't feel good energetically to me. So I use them in, what is it that I use them in? Our hair spray. So our Mane Tamer leave-in conditioner, that is a product that has water. So when do you need preservatives? When there is water. Water inhibits the growth of bacteria and mold. So I use them in our hair mist most often. And if I ever release a cream, which I don't love creams, I prefer butters and oils, then I use it then because it's got water in it. And so the only other time I use them is internal preservatives, which I also talked about a lot, but it's okay because the only one I use is quite simple, and that is citric acid. I use citric acid in all of our syrups. For example, our elderberry syrup, cold and cough syrup, black nettle iron syrup. And so if you're going internal, check out citric acid. Citric acid is great because it just helps you get the pH right to a point where the syrup is more shelf stable and can preserve. What else was I going to say? So the question always comes up, can you use, what about glycerin? What about vitamin E? What about radish ferment? What about essential oils? None of those are actual preservatives. They're not going to inhibit the growth of bacteria and yeast. They will help extend the shelf life because of their antioxidant property. But by extend the shelf life, I mean like a cream or hairspray that has no preservatives will last maybe 2 weeks outside of the refrigerator. If you were to add a ton of vitamin E and essential oils and whatnot, it might last more like a month, but not much. So I don't mess with them. I think if you're going to be adding water to any products, you need to add preservatives to make sure that the medicine that you're making for you or your family or friends that's supposed to help them feel better or make things better is not going to make them worse. You typically can't see bacteria and yeast growth, so just remember that. Okay, next question. Somebody had asked about an overgrowth of yeast that causes itching, potential allergies with their dog. I had told this person, but I'm just going to say it here too. In last month, the January live Q&A, about minute 8 to 13, I talk all about herbal remedies for dogs, including diet. I talk about dosing. I give you my rule of thumb for dosing based on weight, etc. So I'm going to just answer this specific question, but if you have more questions about herbal dosage for dogs and pets, check that out. I also referenced a book that I love called Country Wisdom and Know-How. This book is not specifically on like herbal dosing for pets. It's actually just country wisdom and know-how, like general things. And there is a big chapter on pets. And the cool thing about dogs is that they're not much different than us when it comes to herbal medicine. So my rule of thumb, if you're formulating for a pet, think, what would I use for myself in this situation? Then look it up just to make sure that they're safe for dogs, and use my general rule of thumb for the weight ratio for dosing. Now, this person was asking specifically about the overgrowth of yeast causing itching. So my first recommendation is going to be soothing herbs to give your pet some relief. Those herbs would include chamomile, calendula, plantain, and oats. I think if you're in a position to give your pet a bath, giving them an oat bath would be my number one recommendation for giving them relief, or making an herbal infusion on the stove just with water of any of those herbs I mentioned, chamomile, calendula, plantain, oats, and pouring that into their bath water or just pouring it over them outside. Also, apple cider vinegar, so you could potentially make them their own herbal hair rinse by using part infusion and part apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is also just going to help balance the pH of their skin, just like it does for us when we use it, and just really help level things out, hopefully get rid of that yeast overgrowth. I also recommend adding an egg or gelatinous broth to your pet's food like every other day if they're experiencing this right now. We crack an egg over our dog's food whenever their coats aren't looking great, or if they've got any sort of like wound or anything going on. They're just really great for their coat. Same with broth, all the collagen in there, so good. If you are not a broth person, but you use collagen powder, peptides, or whatever, you can also add that to their food. Okay, so another thing I had mentioned is potentially making a spray or a salve or an oil. So, for example, what I would personally use on my pet if I had this going on would be our wound wash spray, which has got herbs like yarrow, black walnut, things that are antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal. You could also make a tea and add that topically to them, or spray it, and if you don't have witch hazel. And then we also have our anti-itch spray, which happens to have all the herbs that I mentioned for soothing: chamomile, calendula, plantain, oats. And then you might also give them some of these more antimicrobial, antifungal herbs internally. Things like wormwood, yarrow, black walnut, usnea, chaparral, etc. If you think there is an internal yeast growth of any sort, or maybe something else going on. So that would be my recommendation there. When making tinctures, what makes you decide whether or not to do double or triple extractions, and how do you feel about leaving plant materials sitting in alcohol for 4 to 8 months when making a tincture? So I had somebody ask in the last video about solubility, and this question is directly related to solubility too. So I went ahead and made you guys a half-hour video on solubility today. So check that out. That video is really worth watching. It is a very in-depth video all about this exact question, which is basically when you are looking into using an herb and tincturing it, how do you know what menstruum is going to be best, right? Water, alcohol, vinegar, how much alcohol, how much vinegar, how much water, and do you need a dual extract? Like, do you need to add heat also? So solubility is the answer to all those questions. So what I mean is looking at the herb burdock root. Some people are recommended to take burdock root for kidney and liver issues. Some people are recommended to take burdock root for its prebiotic gut healing properties. Guess what? Those are all different constituents of burdock root, and each constituent is either going to be water or alcohol soluble. So, if someone is wanting the more kidney and liver helping properties of burdock, they're going to want to take a tincture because those are alcohol soluble constituents, whereas the prebiotic fibrous demulcent parts of burdock that make it good for your gut are more water soluble. So a tea infusion might be better. If this sounds confusing, go watch that video because I go a lot slower and I give you a ton more information. So a double and triple extraction, what that really just means, double extraction is technically just like water and alcohol. Triple is technically if you're using water, alcohol, and heat. We're typically using heat for our water extraction. So that would just be like making a tea/infusion and adding it to a tincture. This also has to do with solubility. So just check that video out. Let me know if you have any questions because it is a complex video. This is a very chemist topic. And so it's important. So if you have any questions after watching that video, please ask. I would be happy to help. It's a big topic. We will probably go over it a few times. The other question about this was, how do you feel about leaving plant material sitting in alcohol for 4 to 8 months when making a tincture? I don't think it's a huge deal. I don't personally do that because I'm constantly restocking tinctures for the shop. However, I do have some tinctures here at my house, and if that's what you're doing at home, I would say it's really not a big deal. Unless you're tincturing in pure, like 190 proof alcohol, with no water, that is going to like destroy a plant if it's sitting for that long. But if you're just using plain old 100 proof vodka or similar, it's not a big deal. It's going to be fine. I wouldn't like let it go more than a year because things will start breaking down at that point and you won't be getting all the constituents that you're after. So it just won't be as good or well-rounded of a tincture, but it's not a huge deal. What are your thoughts on growing a medicinal garden versus foraging? I live in a desert state and currently have a small overgrown backyard of sagebrush and Russian olive. There are also shepherd's purse, goldenrod, sumac readily available, but not sure what else is out there. I guess my thought is growing my own medicinal plants would give me a chance to see how they look during the growing process and to have things on hand that may be harder to find in a desert environment. I have this idea in my head that everyone forages for their goods, but maybe more of y'all have gardens than I realize. I am kicking myself in the butt because I answered this question really in full in my last video, and I just hope that I'm able to respond as well as I did then. Hopefully the person that asked this was tuned in during this question. Yeah, I hope you were. Anyways, okay, so I think a lot of people think that I do more foraging than I do. And where that comes from is when my business was smaller in the beginning, like 2017 to 2019, I was doing all of the foraging for my business. And that is because I have a unique situation. I live in a rural area on 8 acres. The 8 acres that I live on is pretty untouched, other than the half acre that our house sits on. We are also surrounded by wildlife preservation, parks, WMA, etc. And so we have an abundance of wild plants around us. We have established a relationship with our parks department and our neighbors where we glean invasive species, just plants that are super abundant like kudzu, Japanese knotweed, roses, raspberry, etc. But when my business started to grow a ton in 2019 to 20, it was no longer sustainable for me to wildcraft because the amount of each herb that I would need to wildcraft to meet the needs of my customers would just not be safe to take from the environment all at once. So I switched to purchasing herbs from small farms. And this is really nice too because I'm getting fresh herbs, I'm supporting someone else's small business and my local economy. They're organic, I know exactly when I'm going to get them. I still do some wildcrafting for my own personal medicine cabinet and for my monthly Patreon gifts that are like small batch one-off. But it's not the core of what I do. It's just an element to what I do. And I think that a lot of businesses like mine show those parts where you are out wildcrafting because they're interesting and they help other people learn. It's a very big topic right now, but that doesn't mean that it's all that they're doing. In fact, almost everyone I know buys the majority of their herbs or grows them and rarely forages. When I meet someone who actually wildcrafts and likes to identify wild plants, I'm like, ooh, let's be friends. That said, wildcrafting is a really big topic for a reason. There are definitely more wrong ways to do it than right. So I'm actually going to link in the in the description here a link to my Instagram highlight called Ethical Foraging. And this link is also in response to another question that I got from someone, which was where to forage. So let me paste this link before I forget. So in that highlight, Ethical Foraging, I talk about some ethical practices. I also talk about how to find places to forage. And I think a lot of people have the idea in their mind that you can't forage in parks, you can't forage anywhere, what do you do? But that's actually not true. There are 46 national parks that allow foraging of some degree. And what that means is, you shouldn't go, oh, this park allows foraging. Cool, I'm going to go forage whatever I want. No. A lot of times these parks allow you to forage invasive species, plants that they have deemed harmfully abundant. So having people forage them would be helpful to the environment, is the way they see it. So it's important to look that up because just like with hunting, in Texas, for example, there's a huge abundance of deer. So people can shoot deer like at a much larger season than here in Tennessee. Whereas things like hawks and bear are more protected because there aren't nearly as many of them. So when you go on vacation or you're going to a park, you really want to look into that park and see what plants are protected, like the hawks and the bears, and what plants are okay to forage, like the deer, like kudzu and autumn olive and a bunch of invasive plants. So yeah, check out that highlight because I go over a lot of ideas of how to establish relationships with people, parks departments, etc., and where to look. And also, just to answer your question again, just grow a medicinal herb garden. Why not? I mean, we need more medicinal herbs, so I would say go ahead and do it. But one more thing that I mentioned in my last video in response to this, in response to your part saying, my thought is growing my own medicinal herbs would give me a chance to see how they look during the growing process. This is the part that I really dove into in the last video, so bear with me. My suggestion to you would be to pick a place. If you don't live in a rural area, which I think you do because you said that you said you have a small overgrown backyard. Take photos in every season of, like you said, shepherd's purse, goldenrod, sumac, wild sage, Russian olive. Take pictures of the plants that you don't know. When we first moved to the property that we live on now, go lay down. We took pictures on every walk, every time we went outside. And if we didn't know what the plant was, we would come home, we would go through all of our foraging books, research online, post in groups, get some help identifying it. And we slowly curated a list on my phone, it's just a note, of every plant that we identify. Every single one that I've ever identified, I just put in that note. And I might copy and paste a couple sentences that stand out about its medicinal uses that seem useful to me, or its edibility, etc. And another cool thing that I recommended, if you're new to identifying plants and you're not super familiar with all the plants in the area, use a identification app. There is some things about them that are sketchy, but the one that I like, it's called Picture This. They sorry, my dog is barking and it's really distracting me. Picture This is ran by actual botanists, so you have a much better chance of not getting a wrong answer on there. But always double check. Run the photo through there, take the name that they give you, and look into it and see if that's the plant that you're actually looking at. The cool thing about this is you will start to create an album in your phone or on this app of the photos that you take of plants. And if you do it regularly for a whole year or more, you will have this photo trail. And if you have an iPhone or you're using this app, it'll say exactly when you took the photo, where you took the photo, what the plant was, and that will help you see, oh wow, I didn't even realize this is what periwinkle looked like when it first came out. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't know this is what periwinkle looked like when it was flowering. So that would be my biggest recommendation to you. Okie dokie. Next question. How do you infuse smoke into alcohol? So there's a few ways to do it. How we personally do it, my husband is a chef, so he's got a nice little stand-up smoker. And we use that smoker to infuse all kinds of things, from oil to wax to alcohol. And we will just put a little pan of alcohol in there and trap it in the smoker for however long. You can pull it out, smell it, taste it, see if it's as smoky as you want it, and throw it back in if not. However, if you don't have a smoker, there's a couple other options. Really nice bars and restaurants will use smokers, like little handheld smokers, to infuse drinks, cocktails, foods, hors d'oeuvres, etc. And those are really cool. You can get an electronic one where you put your rosemary or your bark or whatever you're smoking in there. It's got a little burner that turns on and a little tube that you just stick straight into whatever you're smoke infusing. Some of them are not electronic, so you have to put a little charcoal disc in there, light your herbs, and then it's also got that tube that you infuse with. Or there are just some homemade ways you can do it. Those are only like $15 to $25, but if you don't want to buy anything, you can do what I used to do for my herbal oils, which was I would fill their little bottles. I would take my charcoal incense burner, put my resins on the charcoal, and put a box over it, and that would trap the smoke in there. So you got a few options. I don't know what tier this person is. I don't have their name right in front of me, but Anyone who is tier 3 and up, our December Patreon gift was called Reflections of Love. It was an aphrodisiac tincture. It had cedar heart smoke tincture in there, which added a really nice smoky flavor. Okay, next question. This is another one where I promise you I went so in depth on this question in the live Q&A. I am so sorry. I'm going to really try my hardest to give you as much of an answer now, but I hope you might have been one of the people that was tuned into the live. So this question is about menopause. It is, hello, I use YL Progressence Plus for menopause symptoms. I no longer want to use that. I would like to use an herbal medicine. Do you have recommendations? So, first of all, I'm not positive, but I think YL stands for Young Living Essential Oils. So I just firstly wanted to say I do not recommend using essential oils to try to treat anything ever, especially not internally. Externally, essential oils are hormone disruptors, so this actually could have some advantages for menopause, but it's not actually going to treat any of your symptoms long term, and here's why. Essential oils of a plant are one little constituent. So when you are distilling a plant and you're getting those little drops of essential oils, you're just getting the volatile oils of that plant. The volatile oils of a plant don't have a ton, and they definitely don't have like a spectrum of benefits. There are just a couple benefits. So what I would recommend for you is teas and tinctures. Teas and tinctures, and maybe some topicals. We have a tincture that we make for menopause called Pause, and I would absolutely recommend this. It will be in our next release. If you can't get your hands on it, or you'd rather make something at home, I would recommend the herbs that I use in that tincture. So our tincture Pause is an herbal blend to replenish adrenal exhaustion and the common discomforts due to deplenishing hormone levels. These vitamin and mineral-rich herbs help ease menopausal symptoms and bring the body back to homeostasis to help your body recover from its biggest change. The ingredients are raspberry leaf, schisandra berry, dong quai, eleuthero root, white sage, white peony, and black cohosh. So the combination of white sage and white peony specifically together help with hot flashes and night sweats. So if you're dealing with that, don't skip out on that combo. However, if you had to choose 3 of the ingredients on that, don't skip dong quai. I would do dong quai, eleuthero root, and black cohosh, personally. But the schisandra berry and the raspberry leaf are also really great. And another one of our tinctures that I recommend to people experiencing menopause is our brain fog tincture. The ingredients in that one are also incredible for helping balance out hormone levels, especially for deplenishing estrogen. I also wanted to recommend this book that I recommend in every single live Q&A because people always have questions about reproductive organs. Herbal Healing for Women by Rosemary Gladstar. The best book ever. The cool thing about this book, it's not the kind of herbal book that you read front to back. It is meant to be used like, oh, you have a question about hot flashes. Let's go to the menopause section and then to the hot flash section. Oh, you have a question about diarrhea during your cycle. Let's flip to this page. Huge section on menopause. Rosemary Gladstar has done more research on herbs for menopause than anyone else I've ever found. So there's lots of recipes in here for helping with like your deplenishing levels of calcium and iron, the endocrine system, energy, hot flashes, water retention, all kinds of stuff. The things that are used most that I would definitely not miss, which I kind of already mentioned, the dong quai. She uses a ton of wild yam, which you mentioned wanting to use, dong quai, black cohosh, occasionally Vitex, and then a lot of just like nutritive herbs like oat straw, horsetail, borage, nettle. So definitely check this book out. The cool thing about herbs and menopause is that, in my humble opinion, and based on a lot of studies that have been done, herbal medicine is much more, what's the word? You're going to see results from herbal medicine even more than you will things prescribed by your doctor. I am surrounded by women in my life, in my family. I have never had a woman in my life have a good experience with the hormone therapy given to them for menopause by their doctor. Here's why. When you're doing that, you're replacing with a synthetic hormone. Well, at that point, you kind of have to take that forever, and no one wants to do that. With herbs, you are addressing the issue. You're saying, hey, body, guess what? Yeah, I know, we're losing some levels of estrogen. What are we going to do about it? Adjust, like we do. So you're going to support your body in doing so with these herbs, and it should give you some pretty fast relief. So I would do your research, get this book, try to get your hands on our pause tincture, get some of these herbs so you can make yourself some teas. You can even bathe in these things. Yeah. I hope that helps. Okie dokie. Last question. All right. I can't believe I'm done. Take 2 here. Was ideas for using old herbs. So this person was specifically asking about herbs a year or more old. So here's the thing. It highly depends on storage. For example, I vacuum seal all of my herbs and I store them in a cool, dark place. They will technically be good longer than a year. They will technically still be pretty vibrant and have lots of constituents after a year. If they are stored in not airtight plastic or a brown paper bag or something, after a year, they will likely have lost a lot of their color. And in that, they will have also lost a lot of their scent and taste, and therefore a lot of their constituents. So that's my judgment protocol is, what's it smell and taste like and look like? Has it lost a lot of that? If so, let's not use that to treat anything. However, we can use those herbs for things like facial steaming, adding to your humidifier, bathing in, making an infusion to support your pets, making a hair wash, making a spray, really anything topical. So, making a burn bundle or a loose incense blend. So yeah, that would be my recommendations there. Oh my gosh, I think I answered everything. If I didn't, please let me know. I'm a little foggy brained after answering all that and then having it go away. So if I missed your question or you have any follow-up questions, please leave them below. Check out the links I provided, and thank you as always for tuning in.